So, my dear colleagues and fellow cooperators, it really is a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to be here with you in Rome at this, the 39th National Congress of Legacoop, and a particular honour to be with you to recognise the 170th anniversary of the opening of the first shop of the Rochdale Equitable Pioneers Cooperative Society. And for me, this is particularly poignant because between the years 2000 and 2010, during which time I was the Chief Executive of Cooperatives UK, if you like, the Legacoop of the United Kingdom, I also held the position of Secretary of the Rochdale Pioneers Cooperative Society, which was a very significant title to hold. And incidentally, the first woman to hold that honorary title, which was held, thank you, which was held by all General Secretaries of Cooperatives UK since its foundation. And I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees for the National Cooperative Heritage Trust, who created the film, and that's the body that today safeguards the archive of the UK movement, which includes all the historical documents of the pioneers, and it also manages the Toad Lane shop, but the very first shop, which, as you know, was opened on the 21st of December, 1844. The pioneers left us a great legacy in their codification of the principles and values of our movement, what we now know as the Global Statement of Cooperative Identity. And the pioneers spawned a huge global phenomenon, which I believe has been the single most effective and successful initiative to take people out of poverty with dignity that the world has ever seen. At the time of the massive social change and in the midst of industrial revolution, the pioneers found their inspiration and motivation in the work and writing of early thinkers, in particular Robert Owen, the 18th century social philosopher and entrepreneur, who in 1816 wrote, and I quote, "Society may be formed so as to exist without crime, without poverty, with health greatly improved, with little if any misery, and with intelligence and happiness increasing 100-fold. We should note that the pioneers were not the first to form a cooperative, but they were the first to codify the principles that endure to this day, and which we've heard a lot about today. Despite the hardships that prevailed at the time and the anxiety of the pioneers to change the life expectations and aspirations of the working people, they took time together, a whole year in fact, and they took care together to discuss the philosophical underpinning of the cooperative that they were trying to create, looking at the writings and speeches of people like early cooperators, William King, the educationalist, George Jacob Holyoake, the thinker and writer, as well as Robert Owen. And it's remarkable that at the end of that first year, even before opening their store, they published what they called the Law First, that drove the philosophy and the operations of the Rochdale pioneers. So what did the Rochdale pioneers set out to achieve? Their objectives were all very clearly stated in the laws and objects of the Rochdale Society Equitable Pioneers. And the very first paragraph of the laws and objects said, and I quote, "The objects and plans of this society are to form arrangements for the pecuniary benefits and the improvement of the social and domestic condition of its members by raising a sufficient amount of capital in shares of £1 each to bring into operation the following plans and arrangements." And they then went on to establish and list their ambitious plans for the future that will not sound out of place to any one of you cooperators in this room. The first objective was the establishment of a store for the sale of provisions and clothing. And today we call that consumer cooperative or retailing cooperative. The next objective was the building, purchasing, or erecting of a number of houses in which those members desiring to assist each other in improving their domestic and social condition may reside. That is what we know today as cooperative housing. The next provision, the next objective, was to commence the manufacture of such articles as the society may determine upon for the employment of such members as may be without employment or who may be suffering in consequence of repeated reductions in wages. Sounds familiar today. That is what we now know as producer or manufacturing cooperatives and fair employment. Their next objective was, as a further benefit and security to the members of this society, the society shall purchase or rent an estate or estates of land which shall be cultivated by the members who may be out of employment or whose labour may be badly recompensed. That, of course, is cooperative agriculture and fair employment. The next provision was that for the promotion of sobriety, a temperance hotel be opened in one of the society's houses as soon as convenient. I have to tell you, such was the prevalence of drunkenness and sickness due to alcohol abuse during this era, that this objective was an attempt to create a dry society, i.e. an alcohol-free cooperative society. And this, incidentally, is the one objective that the pioneers did not carry out. In fact, they continued to have their meetings at the Weaver's Arms, a local pub, and it's certainly not in the statement of cooperative identity. But the final provision and objective was that, as soon as practicable, this society shall proceed to arrange the powers of production, distribution, education and government, or in other words, to establish a self-supporting home colony of united interests or assist other societies in establishing such colonies. That is, they wanted to change the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us right up to the 21st century and our own era. The continuing aspirations of cooperators across the world, articulated so well by the United Nations when they designated 2012 the International Year of Cooperatives with the slogan, "Cooperative enterprises build a better world." The contribution of our generation of cooperators is to take the aspirations of the pioneers and give it life 170 years later in our way, suitable for the 21st century society, building on those same ambitions, particularly in this fast-changing, volatile world with our modern but nonetheless challenging concerns and threats. The blueprint for a cooperative decade, which gives a modern touch to the objectives of the pioneers, says, "The cooperative model is a commercially efficient and effective way of doing business. It takes account of a wider range of human needs, develops individual participation, builds personal self-confidence and resilience, and creates social capital. Cooperative institutions create long-term security. They are long-lasting, sustainable, and successful." Today, we're taking our message to those who decide on the future of our national, regional, and international policy, economy, and well-being. Here in Rome, at the Food and Agricultural Organization, we seek to develop a future without food insecurity. To the International Labour Organization, We work with them in the struggle for decent work, free from harassment on the grounds of gender, disability, race, religion and sexuality. We take our case to Rio as we contemplate a world with rising temperatures, increasing natural disasters from seas, wind and earth, to the United Nations in the development of the Sustainable Development Goals next year, and for the updating of the Beijing +20 Action Plan for Women. To the G8 and the G20, as we insist that the voice of the billion world citizens is heard, the billion who have responded to the aspirations of the pioneers and joined a cooperative enterprise. We will no longer be invisible or silent in the corridors of power. We want a better balanced, fairer and more just global economy for all. We take our case to the Vatican, where we share the dream of Pope Francis to put the human being back into the global economy, and so much more. What is absolutely clear, colleagues, is that in the principles and values of the Rochdale pioneers, developed 170 years ago, almost to the day, they are very much alive all around us. Most importantly, the key inspiration is that when people of good faith and goodwill join together for the common good, it's possible to do extraordinary things. Colleagues, I just want to make the few comments that I promised at the beginning of my speech, if Lorraine is with me. I want to tell you that I thought today was a fundamentally important debate that you had.
Posso? Oggi per lei è una giornata molto importante e fondamentale, il dibattito che è successo.
In 2013, in the United Kingdom,
nel 2013 nell'Inghilterra,
the British cooperative movement was devastated by a scandal, a unique scandal.
Il movimento cooperativo in Inghilterra era distrutto da uno scandalo enorme.
And the British cooperators, 12 million, were desperately hurt and pained by the loss of trust and betrayal.
E i 12 milioni di cooperatori inglesi sono rimasti molto colpite, soffrivano di questa situazione, questo scandalo.
So I have a sense of some of the things you were discussing here today.
Allora, a quel punto lei capisce abbastanza bene delle cose che voi avete parlato oggi.
But I just want to express my very great respect for the way in which President Lusetti set out the issues so clearly and so frankly.
Lei vuole esprimere il suo rispetto, che è il modo che il Presidente Lusetti ha espresso le sue idee, i suoi commenti.
And I want as well to say what a remarkable debate we heard today. You've given so much of the time of your Congress for this really important fundamental discussion.
Anche come importante questo dibattito che voi avete dedicato a questo congresso, che era molto importante e fondamentale.
And I just did want to say that the very first step in solving the problems that you've been discussing is to acknowledge them and to talk about them. And thank you to everybody who took part in that debate.
È il primo passo di riconoscere questi problemi e di parlare di questi problemi.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Colleagues, together the pioneers gave us a movement that now spans the world. Together, 1 billion citizens, world citizens, are cooperators. Together, the livelihood of 250 million people is secured in a cooperative. Together, our largest 300 cooperatives have a combined turnover of $2.2 trillion US, up 11% in the last 3 years. Let me end, my dear colleagues, by congratulating you as well on the careful and thoughtful way in which you are bringing the 3 key federations in Italy together. 3 federations with long traditions and proud histories, coming together in the true spirit of the Rochdale tradition for the good of Italian society to build a better world. Thank you, and may I wish you a very peaceful and festive Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you very much.